Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. So tonight, actually, I'm doing something very interesting. I had a listener reach out to me and express some interest in having a conversation about some of the issues that he heard me talking about in my podcast. And as you guys know, I do my best to respond to messages. And so I got in touch with Omega. And he was telling me a little bit about himself, and he has some really interesting insights and really good points. And he is launching his own podcast. He actually just started his channel on BitChute. So he reached out to me, and we've spent the last 20 minutes or so just kind of chatting before we decided to record. And we had a good conversation where we shared some good ideas. So we decided we were going to record for a little while and have a little conversation, introduce Omega to the audience, and hopefully you guys will check out his channel. So Omega, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. It was really, it's always fun to get different perspectives and new perspectives from people. And you were telling me a little bit about your interest in prepping. And this was actually, you made a short video as sort of an introduction upon my request. And I thank you for doing that, by the way, but you were definitely had stressed your belief in prepping and your history as a prepper. So why don't we begin there, and just you can tell us a little bit about, whatever you want to share about your background and how, where you're coming from and how, your philosophies and ideology and how you got into prepping, if there was a certain influence or certain event that happened, or maybe it's something that runs in the family, how you got into prepping, and just sort of we can branch out from there, and I'll ask you some questions, and maybe we can talk about some of the issues leading up to where we're at right now with the audits and so forth. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into prepping.
Okay. Well, I grew up in upstate New York for the most of my life, and been away from there since 2014. And before 2013, I was pretty much oblivious to the Second Amendment and to pretty much everything going on. And I consider myself just more like a moderate individual. I never voted before 2014, basically, when I was still up in New York. And when Barack Obama decided to come on TV after the Sandy Hook incident, I'm just going to refer to that. Something was very off, and something woke me up inside from not being completely oblivious to something and then saying, oh, we're going to ban all semi-automatic weapons. And then I came across a video from a gentleman named James Yeager from Tactical Response in Tennessee. I'll get to that later on. But and I saw this guy make a 1.5 minute video that got people either cheering him on, like, yeah, man, we're right with you, and then for people like, this guy's a terrorist. And I went out, I think like the day after the Andrew Cuomo, the governor, or I'll call him the dictator of New York, decided to arbitrarily sign into law, basically in the middle of the night, basically, no public discourse, banning semi-automatic weapons, basically the California style assault weapons ban, but they just added a few more things on it. You could still have an AR-15, but you can't detach the magazine so easily, basically, if you have, its standard features like a threaded muzzle and a retractable stock, that kind of thing. And then limiting to 7 rounds in a magazine. And then they're like, nobody makes 7-round magazines except for 22 and maybe some abstract calibers out there. So then they had to keep a 10-round mag ban, that kind of stuff. So I'm like, I'm out of here. Screw this. I mean, and I just figured, I just started prepping from there. I also found Christ during then. And people were like, get good with Christ, because we believe the world is going to come to what we believe in Revelation. I don't believe exactly Revelation is going to exactly happening, because I think that was predictive programming by the cabal. I am a big follower of Christ. I thank the Lord, the Father, every day, and I ask for constant protection, and especially for patriots and everybody spiritually as well, because we are influenced heavily spiritually. We don't realize it.
Absolutely.
So basically from there, I moved to Pennsylvania for 2 years, and I worked in the restaurant industry. My dad owns, um, he owns one diner up in upstate New York. He had three at one time, but you know, he lost one through a divorce. They had to close down the other one because of franchises moving in and just eat up all the local businesses. He's lucky to still have that one today. It's doing pretty well, and he suffered quite a bit and up in the lockdowns in New York. But he's pretty he's pretty smart when it comes to street smarts. You know, my dad, I'm sorry, both my parents come from Greece, so I'm first generation born American. So that's where I like Omega. It's just one of my favorite.
That's a good name. It's a really good name.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Especially God of War has a logo on there. I'm like, I love that.
Good logo too. I like it.
No, thank you. So I saw it. I'm like, I'm going to use that. I also do speak Greek as well. If you are working diners in the Northeast, you're probably going to run into a bunch of Greeks that own restaurants of some kind.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they make some great food at those diners, though. I know.
Oh yeah.
Experience. I've spent quite a bit of time in that area in Long Island. I used to date a girl who lived out there. So
yeah, that pretty far from where I used to live, but yeah, if we did go out there, it's a drive, but it was a nice area.
Yeah, you were more upstate. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Just a horribly run state. I mean, horribly run state. Beautiful land. But after a while, it gets old to just be told, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And if we caught you with this, you're going to prison for 10 years. You're a Class E felon. It's like if you owned a quote unquote assault weapon without registering in New York, you're treated worse than a pedophile. And it's like, there's something wrong with that. And I'm like, I'm not
gonna. Well, we know the reason for that, of course.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now I know that.
Yeah, they're all pedophiles. That's the reason for that. And the real target has always been the American gun owner.
Oh yeah.
And that's that's evident to, and I actually haven't really on my channel yet, which is kind of ironic because I'm a huge supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm sure that's probably not a shock to my audience, but I haven't really discussed the Second Amendment. I've been so focused on so many other issues surrounding what's happening right now. But I absolutely agree that the Second Amendment, I think for me in a lot of ways, because similar to what you were telling me, I can't remember if we had started recording yet or not, but you were telling me that your awakening started kind of back in right around 2014. And at the same time, you were getting into firearms and so forth. And I recall my experience as well as mine was a year earlier, right around the time, interesting you say that right
actually
around
2013. Yeah.
Was it 13? Yeah, it was right around the time that Obama was sworn in for the second term. And it was almost as if a switch went off in my brain, and I can't remember consciously what the thought was, but there was something just happened where something clicked, and I realized that that the entire system, the entire establishment was crooked, and I couldn't quantify it. I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't tell you who the players were and this and that. It was really a gut feeling. It was a spiritual feeling. It was really it was the beginning of an awakening process, but it certainly coincided with a huge interest and obsession really at the time with firearms. I just became absolutely immersed in it, and it really accompanied my awakening process. And I think a big reason for that is because when you become a gun owner, as I'm sure you can speak on this, when you become a gun owner from someone who's never, especially if you haven't grown up in a family that was a Second Amendment family, a gun loving family, and you weren't around firearms and you were taught that guns were evil or whatever. And then all of a sudden you become a gun owner, and you experience what it is to have that responsibility, not only to just have the responsibility, but also to be able to have the capability of being able to actually defend your life against threats. It really does change you in a lot of ways. And especially when you mix that in with the political backdrop of everything that's happening, where you have the Democrats constantly, and really not just the Democrats, the rhinos as well, constantly coming after the Second Amendment, is a huge red pill. And we always joke about this on the right, that the Democrats are the best firearm salesmen in the world. that nobody could sell more guns than Barack Obama. And, there's a big reason for that. When they start talking about gun control, and they start talking about doing all these things, I mean, folks run out there and, they take their self-defense and that freedom very, very, very seriously. And I do believe that the zeal and, the enthusiasm with which they've really gone after the Second Amendment in recent years, of course, it all started back in Columbine. And then, of course, all of the false flags that followed and, all the mass shootings and so forth, the push has just intensified and intensified. It's really, really woken a lot of people up. I think it's red pilled quite a few people. I don't think a lot of people talk about that, but I think that's very true.
Oh no, and I think a lot of people should be talking more also about Waco and Ruby Ridge. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at the premier agency that loves selling guns to cartels that got over 400 Mexicans killed, I think, like a few months after Fast and Furious, and then now wants to ban pistol braces now, which and none of that stuff is gonna pass muster with the courts, because the a real paramount thing that President Trump did is that and I wouldn't say quietly, but he nominated over 300 federal judges all over the place. That's why the Ninth Circuit just overturned California's assault weapon ban after 32 years. And it was from the same man. They call him Saint Benitez. And it's interesting how this guy, I think a year ago, he lifted the ban on magazines. And but it was only for like a week, but people were buying them up like crazy out in California. Like Palmetto State Armory ran out of everything for that week. It was great. I was like, I love it. I was like, I hope they could do that up in the Northeast, to just give these guys a little bit of reprieve. But the good news I can definitely say is that New York alone, I mean, it's a pretty big state. It's got, minus the exodus that's been happening. There's been, let's say about 19 million people in the entire state. New York City obviously has the majority of that population. The amount of people who have not registered their guns, anything of their assault weapons, you want to call it, in that configuration, is about a 95% non-compliance rate.
Which is wonderful.
95%, and that just says that they tried to do like an Australia type of ban up there, but they haven't done that yet. But even in Australia, I read this on some prepper site back in like 2018, that Australia, believe it or not, still is trying to do amnesty for people given in pretty much any modern gun, and they have only received about 20% of the guns. They said 20% out of the entire country. Basically, they hid their guns. And I'm like, wait a minute, I thought they took them all. And
that's just the media then again,
yeah.
They're going to show you a huge dump truck full of guns. They're going to show you, whatever footage they have, and they're just going to lie to you. That's what they do, and that's, go ahead.
Speaking of Waco, I watched Mel K's channel quite a bit. I like a lot of her stuff. She actually interviewed a guy that is he was, I think, part of that same group of people, the Branch Davidians, and I think he still calls himself one today. He said what's going on over there is that Bush Senior had something really big to do with that, and then the Waco raid had a lot to do with pedophilia, human trafficking. So that's something that like a lot of people really should start looking into. And if you look on Mel K's channel and BitChute, she's got it there. But she does like a video like almost every day. But this is, I think, like 2-3 months ago. Highly recommend people go look into that, because Waco, a lot more people need to pay attention to what the ATF is really about. That is the gun Gestapo, and we're not giving up guns in this country. I can tell you that one right now. There's just last year alone during the lockdowns, there have been over 8 million brand new gun owners, brand new. And that's not to say for the other people who did private transfers, build their own guns, from 80% lowers, and which is legal, by the way. And a lot of people,
folks aren't giving them up. There's no way.
No, hell no.
This is America. We're not giving up our guns. Yeah. It's not happening. That's a line in the sand, and the deep state knows if they cross that line, it will be war. There's not
Oh
going to
yeah,
be any question about that. And I think, but I also believe that the white hats, again, this ties back into, of course, what's going on today and what's happening. We can kind of go back and forth here. We can talk about Waco because I hadn't heard that, by the way, and I
yeah.
am a fan of Mel K as well. So I'm going to have to now. Who was she interviewing? In?
I forget
You
the guy's
remember?
name, but he said he's a Seventh Day Adventist, I believe, or he calls himself a Branch Davidian still.
All right, and this was a couple months ago. You said,
Yeah, a few months ago. I was up at work. I work as a welder, by the way, now, but for the past 2 years, I'm looking to go into trucking. So I wanted to kind of fill in that gap right there. So I went to manufacturing because of President Trump. And actually, I was able to keep my job during this lockdown. And it's interesting how God told me go into manufacturing. Bad times are coming. Oh, okay. I did that, and like, welding's a tough job. It really is. Just doesn't pay what it should. But anyways, sorry, it was a side note there. But the yeah, this interviewer, if I could find the exact video from there, I'll send you the link and then post that up there.
yeah, absolutely. I can post it on my Telegram. And by the way, if you're going to start up your own podcast, which I know you're doing, good idea to have a central hub like that, and you can post it as well.
Yeah, we could bounce back and forth that way. If one of us finds something, or whatever, we'll just ping each other on that and say, here,
Absolutely.
check this out, because there's so much stuff coming out at such at hyper speed that we just can't all of us figure it all out at once. And I have a different perspective on some things. My perspective on what's going on, and I don't know if the White Hats have planned this into the overall plan using Project Looking Glass, which I would like to get more info on that later on. You have put up videos before on that, and that's actually how I got into looking at Project Looking Glass as well. I'm trying to figure is how is it going to look? The other day, I would say if President Trump comes back, and I'm saying it's going to be when now, because the audits are these things are just booming. It's going to force people to demand them back. He won fair and square.
Absolutely. I mean, these are, as I pointed out many times, these are scientific forensic audits. This is not coming from the Trump team. This is the mainstream media. Of course, they're going to try to spin it. They're going to try, but they're not going to be able to, because there are certain things that you just simply cannot spin, no matter how many times they try to tell people that the sky isn't blue. Sure, there are going to be a small percentage of people who are going to believe it.
Oh yeah.
But Americans just aren't going to buy it. I mean, they know the truth when they see it. So when this truth comes out, I agree with you. It's going to be very interesting to see how they react.
Yeah.
It's also going to be very interesting to see how the public reacts. I'd like to be interested to hear your take on how do you think the mainstream media will react to these revelations, about which really aren't revelations. It's just prima facie truth. But how do you think the mainstream media is going to react? And then we can also talk about, what are some of your thoughts about how do you think the public, the average person, is going to react when all this information starts to really be right in their face and they can't hide from the truth anymore?
Well, for starters, on the public end, I can definitely see a probably about 20-30% of the population who despise President Trump for whatever reason, even though their lives have been enriched because he's rolled back decades of regulations. He's not perfect, and I disagreed with him how he handled the gun control stuff, but he did deflect. He had to deflect because the Vegas thing was a huge blow to us, and that was obviously a false flag. A bump stock did not do that. I don't give a damn what anybody says. So just
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't use a bump stock on a bipod. It defeats the purpose of using the recoil. But anyways, on a side note from that, a few things I disagree with the president on, but very few. I agree with
I'll make some comments on that, on Trump's approach on that when you're done.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. And I understand the strategy he had to come by. And he wanted to give the national carry reciprocity, which would your permit in say Florida would be good in New York, But of course they didn't want that. The state is up in the Northeast and the West Coast stuff, God forbid. But anyways, the public, I think they're going to see a certain percentage, a smaller percentage militant are going to come out of the woodwork, and we're going to find out they've been trained by groups like ISIS, Al Qaeda, Hezbollah, Weather Underground. Well, Barack Obama's favorite people, Hillary Clinton's favorite people. These people are going to be training more of these Antifa people, but a lot of them are not going to have the guts to do what they want them to do. I firmly believe they're going to try to take over some cities by the thousands with small arms. It sounds crazy, but the police have already shown they can't handle that kind of onslaught. They just can't do it. If they're not geared for that. And even then, how many cops are they going to hire now when they've been told that they're they're Satan incarnate? Granted, I'm not a blue line guy, but I've always respected police. But I have a problem when they're sitting outside of a school being shot up on, and they're just sitting out there and then saying, "Oh, we should get rid of guns." I have a problem with that.
Well, those are operatives in my view. Those aren't real police.
And the police in their own departments have to start flushing out these corrupt.
Absolutely.
They have to do it because we can't do it. We're not in there. And we've been barred legally from doing anything. I mean, the Constitution flat out says that the militia is law enforcement of the land with the sheriff. There's nowhere it says where the police department literally overrides your rights. It doesn't say that anywhere in the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights. And we've just morphed into this like pre-Nazi Germany style of country. But the good news, a lot of states doing constitutional carry now. Sheriff Richard Mack, I love that guy. I'd love to shake that guy's hand because you wouldn't think he was a modern day police officer. He's a retired sheriff, but he literally took on the feds, sued them, told the feds, if you come into my county, take guns, I'm arresting all of you. I'm like, that's exactly the kind of police we need. But to get around that, if and when President Trump is reinstated, and he's giving clues that he's going to be reinstated soon. The problem is how are they going to do it without literally kicking off, kinetic warfare from the left, and a lot of deep staters. That's my thing is how are they going to do this? How is the mainstream media is going to be able to not lie about this and cover it up?
Yeah, well, that's the big question, right? That's the big question. How are all the pieces going to come together? What's the first domino going to fall? I agree. My feeling on it is this: I do believe that you're right in the sense that yes, we've been barred, from doing anything up until this point. I think that's only based upon the agreement of the American people to go along with whatever it is that the state is telling them they can and cannot do. But once people feel as if their lives are threatened, or if they feel as if their property is threatened, or if they feel as if their family is threatened, all of that's going to go out the window. And it's really just going to be folks they're going to take care of themselves. And that's just the way it's going to be. And I've said up until this point, really, the American patriots haven't shown up to the party, so to speak. We've seen the left out there. We've seen them rioting and burning cities and so forth and so on. We've seen the police stand down time after time. We've seen just constant examples of this. And the patriots, of course, we've all, in large part, we've been patient, we've been calm, we've been praying, we've been having faith, but we really haven't shown up yet. In a sense, and if that day ever happens, I think quite honestly, see, my feeling is this, because I think if that day ever happens and as you say, kinetic warfare kicks off and it really gets going, and it's going to be very, very, very difficult to contain it, because of course, well, for obvious reasons, really, but to say nothing of the way that the country is divided right now, it's going to be extremely difficult. So I have to think, being a person, and you can disagree with me on this, but being a person who has faith in the white hats and faith in the plan, I have to imagine, and the ability, of course, to game all this stuff out, even though I don't understand it, I do believe that they do have this capacity to be able to do it. I can't imagine that they would not somehow account for what we're talking about right now and somehow have some sort of plan to deal with it. And it actually brings to mind what Gene Decode was talking about in terms of the vaccine, and targeting the Mark Ultra types. who are basically embedded in the population and are everywhere. And like you said, a lot of people could come out of the woodwork. Well, the first thing I thought of when you said that, well, yeah, absolutely. We'd expect to see the Antifa. We'd expect to see the, the radical left out there. But what we might not expect is to see all of these random people all of a sudden out of nowhere getting triggered and going and just causing absolute havoc. And if that happens, as I was saying before, it's going to be near impossible. It's going to require divine intervention to stop that. And to stop the country from completely unraveling. So I guess the point I'm making is that even though I don't have an explanation that I can say is 100% solid, I have to believe that there is some tactical approach here because I've been told right from the beginning by the insiders that ultimately the entire Q plan, going back years and years and years, but certainly as we've gotten closer and closer to the rollout of the big reveal and the Great Awakening, the entire plan was to avoid having a civil war and to avoid having Americans kill each other. And I've been told that that was Trump's highest priority, was to avoid that type of bloodshed of Americans on Americans, because ultimately the big reveal in the Great Awakening is going to be all about Americans, and not just Americans, but people all over the world realizing who the real enemy is. And the last thing that Trump and the White Hats wanted, and the alliance, really the Galactic Alliance wanted, was Americans fighting each other and treating each other as the enemy and not recognizing who the enemy is. Because if that's the road that we go down and we get involved in a kinetic war and everything just falls apart, and then it really does become, in a sense, the law of the jungle, every man for himself, and God only knows what will happen at that point. So I have to imagine that, this whole plan has been set up. And I think that's also a big part of why it's so confusing, why there's so much disinformation. Why is it almost impossible to figure out it is impossible unless you're one of the 9 or 10 people who know the plan. I mean, it's completely impossible to understand and to know all the different, and to make sense of all the different things that are happening. People have theories and people postulate all these different theories and ideas, but no, of course, nobody really knows. Yeah. And, what you were saying about, Trump and his approach with the Second Amendment, getting back to that a little bit, I do believe that ultimately Trump he's a chess player. And I believe he was gaming the left the entire time. I do believe that he wanted to, because he knows how rabid they are about gun control. He knows how much they want guns. That is their absolute dream come true, would be to get their assault weapons banned through and to ban all the semi-autos and then ultimately, of course, even come after everything, even the single shots. That's ultimately what they want to do. And Trump knew that. And he knew how badly they wanted it. And I think we've seen examples of Trump time after time baiting the enemy and then walking right into his trap, because in that case, what happened? They had Dianne Feinstein and Pelosi and all of them, giddy and laughing and, talking about how they wanted to take everybody's guns. And so the entire country got to see that. Yeah. And that's the thing about Trump, is that ultimately I think Trump knows and has faith in the American people. He doesn't need to spoon feed information to the American people. I think he understands how to communicate with us through code. And that's also, I think, a big part of why the Q plan has been so successful up until this point, because it really has confused the enemy, because their whole trick, their whole game is deception. But they don't know how to react when deception is used against them, because they're so used to being able to deceive and manipulate the public that now all of a sudden, when you've got, a group emerging, of course, that's been battling them for decades behind the scenes, and then you have a group of patriots emerging that are awakening, they can't handle that. They don't know what to do, because if they lose the ability to deceive the American people, and of course they're losing that ability more and more and more every day. It's shocking that they haven't lost it completely at this point for people like you and I, but for the average person, they're losing their grip very, very quickly. Because even folks who are, I have to say that, and I've talked a lot about this on my channel, that, one of my big frustrations has been that more people haven't come up to me, whether it's friends or family or associates, acquaintances, and haven't come up to me and said, you know, you are right about that. Because so many things have come out already that it's absolutely shocked me that more people haven't woken up. However, I'm starting to see a little bit of the confidence scheme start to wear off of the left. The people that I know who are propped up with their, you know, their false ideology and all of their lies and deception because it's propped up by the mainstream media, they're extremely confident about their ignorance normally. And what I'm starting to see happen now, and this is a very positive trend, is even, you know, the folks who normally are very, very confident in all of their, you know, disinformation, they don't know a damn thing, but they think they know everything. And boy, are they confident that they, you know, that they've got me pegged and they've got me figured out, and that, you know, they look down on me. And I'm noticing all of a sudden that I don't know whether it is that folks are waking up, those folks, or whether they're just getting to the point now where they're finally starting to maybe possibly question a little bit, just a little bit, because there is only so many things that you can see. Unless you are 100% willfully ignorant, in my view, there are only so many things that you can see before you have to start questioning. If you have a brain that even works, if you have an ounce of integrity and you care about the truth at all, there are only so many things that you can look at and witness and not think to yourself, wait a minute, something's wrong here. Something's not right. The same thing that happened to you and I years ago, you know? So I think that, you know, I mean, I do think that we're moving in the right direction, but like, you know, but I also, I'm very, very much, that's not to say that I don't support the idea of prepping. I, in fact, probably not to the same level that you are, but I am a prepper, a bit of a prepper myself, because I do believe ultimately in being prepared. I think that's what it's all about. And I think not only is it a good idea, I think it's a responsibility of a patriotic American.
Oh yeah.
All right. So I've gone on for a while. So tell me some of your thoughts on some of the things I've put out there.
Well, no, you made a lot of good points, and obviously, the White Hats had to have gamed out a possible real crap scenario like like kinetic warfare, and then say a separation in the country. My biggest thing where I'm just like, okay, how are they going to take down all these governors, these corrupt law enforcement agencies in a lot of places? Like, this is where it gets extremely massive, and I'm like, that's where I'm like, okay, it's one of those conversations where it's probably like, okay, that's out of my paycheck league, that, type of thing. But it's just like, I like to think about these things a lot. I read a lot of novels, that kind of thing, of just, what if, based on the current situations. But the Q plan has actually been kept things overall peaceful, overall, not in some areas. Obviously they're not going to be able to control one area or two, or a few neighborhoods, something like that. When you talked about what Gene Decode said about the MK Ultra people being activated, I didn't know that there was like that many, like one per neighborhood or something. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's
Yeah, I had no idea. That was absolutely stunning.
I'm like, okay, then that's very serious. It's not that the American people we're gonna fall to it now. Oh my God, they outnumber us. They still don't outnumber us. It's just, they still don't.
Well, Gene also pointed out that the American people, of course, we're the largest standing army in the world.
Oh,
and
yeah.
We have the most weapons.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Not only that, we have the most will to use them if necessary to defend our freedom and defend our lives. I mean, there's just I honestly don't believe, even though they may act as if, I don't believe that the left doubts that for a second. Because honestly, I think if they started to come in to certain areas of the country, if they go looking for war in certain areas of the country, they're going to find it. And they know that.
And the Patriots will get help over there. Believe me. There have been people saying, like, hey, if they make a move on you guys, put out the call, and people from other states will show up to help. And even some law enforcement people said that they'd help out too. They just said they wouldn't be able to do it officially, but they flat out said that they're not going to let the country, go to a dictatorship of any kind.
Well, if it gets kinetic, all of the laws and all that stuff's going to
go.
go
They're out the window. They're out the window. It's basically like, yeah, we don't care what the ATF says and their little rulings, which
Yeah,
aren't
we're
laws,
done. We're
which aren't
done at
laws,
that
by the
point.
way. Just for people out there scared of what's going on, the ATF can make a ruling. It is not a law because the law says one thing, their interpretation of the law says another thing, and we keep beating them in court. So we beat them
Well,
in
they're a
court all the
criminal organization, just like
oh,
the
big time,
IRS.
big
I
time,
mean, we know
big
that.
time.
We
Oh
absolutely
yeah,
know that. I mean, the ATF is absolutely, you hit the nail right on the head. They're
oh yeah.
there. They're there. What did you say? I didn't want to put
It's
words
the
in your
gun
mouth.
Gestapo.
That's right. Yes. I thought that's what it was. I
Yeah,
wasn't sure.
it's the gun Gestapo, and I take
Yeah.
that word from Matt Bracken, who's a former Navy
Oh, I
SEAL.
love Matt Bracken. Yeah, he's great.
Awesome dude. I love listening to him. I haven't listened to him very much lately because in his mind is like the country's done, but at the same time, I read the enemies foreign and domestic series, the first three books. I've read those books, and it's just like, oh my gosh, if the country ends up like in his books, man, like, oh man, that's gonna be hell. Um, Now I read from a gentleman named Kurt Schlichter, who used to be a colonel, or retired is a retired colonel in the army. He's a conservative guy on Town Hall, and he wrote a series of books. He's coming out with the sixth book where the country does split, and it's very interesting how he uses all the current events going on, how it was stolen from President Trump. I highly recommend people read that. It is a novel, and he says, I do not wish for this to happen. Where I am concerned it may get to this point. But it gives you an idea of people to open their minds and say, okay, this is what's at stake. Not to say, it's gonna be business as usual. No, it's not gonna be business as usual.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I
Yeah.
really am. I'm glad you brought that up because I think that the apathy issue is really for, and again, this is not to, not to sound lecturing to anyone in my audience, especially because I know that people in my audience and hopefully who will become your audience as well, that this is not information that you don't already know. This is, I mean, we know that you already think this way, but the apathy, so the apathy that we're talking about, of course, doesn't apply really to folks who are really turned on right now and who are active. But I think that I really do believe in I don't know if you want to call it a theory or the argument, but the idea that the reason that we're experiencing so much pain right now as Americans, as patriotic Americans, is in large part by design by the white hats to teach us a lesson. And that lesson ultimately is that we can never afford apathy as patriots. Apathy and and forget patriotism, but apathy and freedom, they don't go hand in hand. And I think that the big lesson that we need to take away from all this, a big part of the Great Awakening, of course, it's going to be learning about who our real enemies are and where we really came from and what's really out there in the universe and all the things that we've been lied to about. But what it's really, really going to be about, I think, is going to be teaching folks a lesson about being actively engaged in their lives and being aware and awake all the time, and not allowing and sitting back and saying, okay, well, I'm going to allow someone else to make laws and run my life for me. And I really agree with what Gene was saying when he talked about how the average American has a slave mentality.
Yeah.
They think that they're free. If you ask them that if they're free, that, they'll say, yeah, I'm free. And of course, but the truth is they probably don't really feel free because they don't have a patriotic mindset. They don't have a free man and woman's mindset. They have a slave mentality. And I think that's a big reason of how we got into this whole position, because even good people out there, even well-meaning people, even patriotic Americans, eventually, we got to a point, and a lot of it was not our fault, because a lot of it was just, due to the mind control and the constant silent weapons and the undeclared war being waged against us, that we didn't even really know that we were being hit and attacked this entire time. And that's a whole separate issue. So a lot of the apathy, I think, was sort of induced into Americans purposefully. I think that a lot of it was done on purpose. And I think we're going to find out more and more about that. But nevertheless, I still think at the end of the day, we had a responsibility this entire time, not just our generation the last generation, but for generations, we've had a responsibility. And ultimately, I think that we as Americans have kind of dropped the ball. And that's the reason that we're in this position, collectively speaking. And I think that that's a big part of what we're experiencing right now. We're experiencing all of this disinformation and all this uncertainty and all of this pain ultimately, because every single day for a real patriot right now is a day in hell. When you wake up and you've got fake Biden. I mean, God only knows who the heck that is, but I don't believe it's Joe Biden. I mean, you got a guy whose hands are going through microphones and heads are going through walls. And again, I mean, it's hell for all us patriots. And again, it sort of ties back into what I was saying before about how many times can folks see this and just say, well, that's just CGI, or, oh, well, how many times can they engage in, how long is the cognitive dissonance, is it going to go on? But I think that the Q plan is really, it's really about, we've often thought that it's been about awakening all the sheep out there. And I think that's, of course, at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. But I think a big part of what we're suffering through right now is being done to us for our own good. And that's, again, I could be wrong about that. And you may have a different viewpoint on it, but I think that a big reason that we're in this position right now is because of that apathy. And I think that we're learning a very important lesson as patriots. So what are your thoughts on that?
I was think of a child, they want to touch everything. And the parent says, don't touch that. You're going to burn yourself. Don't touch the stove. They don't know what it is yet. The stove is hot. They touch it. It's cold. Okay, no big deal. I'll touch it more. Touch it more. Then next thing they accidentally touch it when it's very hot. Psst, and they start crying. The parent says, I told you not to touch it, but I allowed you to touch it just for a brief second so you could feel enough pain that now you're never going to touch it again unless it's like literally by accident. And that's just a very simplified metaphor, but really you got to look at the public really in the whole world. I mean, America's just one country, but we've had it the best compared to most other countries. We've had everything we wanted. Mommy and daddy give us what we want. We can go out there and make a good living. Give an example, the 1980s. I was born in 81. My dad said that was probably the best years of his life. He was able to start a business back then, a lot easier to start a restaurant. Now today, forget it. It's almost impossible. Like getting hit with thousands of dollars in fees and, pretty much extortion fees from the local and state government and the federal government.
That's exactly what they are.
It's extortion. It's nothing more than someone putting a gun to your head and saying, pay me this fee, otherwise you're going to starve. I don't care what they call it. It is what it's no different than the mob going around.
Theft by another name is still theft, and that's the way.
Absolutely. And it's not by your consent, because how is it your consent logically when they say we're going to come down at 3 a.m. and kill you, your family, and your dog if you don't pay us this, this tax money over here? That's not even consent at this point. Now you're forcing them. That's not a free country. It's just, and I don't care where it's going. If the government wants money so bad, well, presidents in the past used tariffs. That's why President Trump was brilliant using tariffs. He wasn't punishing the American people. Hey, Italy, you want to buy this from us? You're going to pay 25% more on it. Okay, great. It's worked for hundreds of years, thousands of years, if anything. You don't punish your own people. And really what it comes down to is that a lot of people don't realize that the structure of government has been so invaded at all levels, even down to the local level. You may even know your local legislator at the county level and might be a decent person, but when they're in those seats, they've probably been told, if through some envelope, do this, or we're going to release photos of you in high school at your high school party coming out. And it's like, it's literally become a giant, as Scott McKay likes to say, it's the Khazarian mafia. And that's an actual thing. I've looked into it and I'm like, wow. And I've said that for years. It's really interesting. But when it comes down to the public, I don't think the white hats really want to go sit here and play God. I think there's a lot of divine intervention going on, to a degree. But remember, God does allow wars to go on. He does allow it. So for patriots like us, we don't want to see any fellow American go through hard times, and we can only do so much. And I'm sure a lot of good police out there really want to avoid any and all bad situations like that and really want to clean up some things too. I think a lot of them do. I think a lot of them are tired of having to play babysitter all the time too. Some of them are just like, they shake their head at just a lot of these laws and they're like, I'm not enforcing that. Screw that. So a shout out to, to the good cops out there who are silent because they have to be. Kudos to
Absolutely.
you. I say kudos to you guys, but please start telling people at your local levels and, give some code that you're on our side, because a lot of people don't understand. They don't know who's who. They don't know who's deep state or who's a patriot. And I think a lot of them should just start doing very subtle things, kind of like how the Q stuff has been teaching people to talk in code.
Absolutely. Mhm.
Like a little hat tip to say, hey, we're on your side. Just just be cool for now. Don't worry, we got your back. Compared to the corrupt ones, there's corrupted everywhere, and that's how bad it is everywhere, the whole world.
Yeah, well, I think that if there were to be some sort of a civil war, that I agree with you that there's no way that local law enforcement would be able to handle it or contain it. That's the only hope that we would have at that point would be for the military to come in and to try to quell the situation, I guess, for lack of a better word. But
Yeah.
and it comes down to, I mean, I believe that while I believe that a civil war scenario certainly is possible, and who knows, I mean, going back to what Gene Decode was saying about different timelines and the choices that we make collectively, I mean, who knows, maybe that's one possible option. That's one possible way that we could go. But I still believe that there has to be some sort of a plan to be able to ensure that it doesn't completely spiral out of control, because I do think that there will be pockets of violence. I mean, I think there's no way around that.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to stop that.
Yeah, that's not going to be something that we're going to stop. But you got to wonder, I mean, how many folks are going to come out of the woodwork, as you said? I mean, is it going to be, how localized is it going to be? How widespread could it possibly be? I think that it could really get ugly if it starts to spill out of the cities, quite honestly. Because I think I feel really bad for the folks in the cities, because they're in essence trapped right now, because there so many of the police officers out there who are, good men and women are, I hate to say it, but they're probably going to follow orders if that's where their paycheck is coming from. And their livelihood is kind of going to be what they're going to think about first. Now, if things completely fall apart, who knows what's going to happen? But, folks who, I don't think there aren't too many police officers out there who are very vocal. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because they've been intimidated into silence. To some extent, I think that you can't really, I certainly can't judge them for that, because, they're in a situation where they're probably worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. It's certainly very, very difficult to be a police officer right now, as we know.
Yeah.
I mean, every single day they go out there and they risk their lives and they do their job. And, on average, I think most police officers are good cops. But of course, they're, so many of these precincts are corrupt, and so much of the leadership really has been captured already. Is really just an extension of the deep state. So I think if it ever really got to that level where we were relying on law enforcement to step in, I think we're in some real trouble, because I don't think they wouldn't have the capacity to be able to really do anything about it.
Well, it's the same thing at 107 likes to say a lot. And I mean, I like listening to his intel on a lot of things. I don't think he's correct on everything, but I think for the most part, he's right on the money for a lot of things. But exactly as he said, is people think, oh, the audits are going to change things. He's like, the audits aren't going to do a damn thing. And I'm like, but he says, this is his opinion. He's not God. He's not the guy who's making all the plans. He's obviously some kind of military strategist or retired, because it's just the way he talks about things. But he says is that the military already has everything they need. Is they need a certain amount of population to be awake enough. And I'm like, how are they going to figure that one out? But I'm guessing they have something to gauge internet talk and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I talked to Gene about that. That exact question. Actually, that was one of my questions. But yes, they do have the ability to be able to gauge where the public is at. We continue. Okay. Go ahead.
They have, but he also says, he says everything is captured. The courts, law enforcement.
Yep. Right.
Everything is captured. He says that there's obviously good individuals at all levels. There's good FBI agents, there's good CIA agents, there's good. I think
By the
CIA
military is the only way.
and I believe the numbers, it was about 2/3 of the military voted for Trump the first time around, and this time probably about the same thing. So a lot of the Marine Corps, I think over 40% of them refused the jab, and I think it's the rank and file for the most part that are generally on our side. And this is what I've heard from people recently retired from the military, and obviously have family members in there, and they're like constitution all the way. We don't care. We don't care if some leftist dictator comes in. We're not. They'll go AWOL. They'll take a bunch of goodies with them, and then they'll train up a whole.
Well, I don't
city
doubt
of
that.
people.
I don't doubt that.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I think some
and
people will. Yeah, but I
oh
don't
yeah,
think it would be enough of a force, in other words, for them to be able to, maintain order. I think certainly they would join the fight. Absolutely. But will they
absolutely.
be able to maintain order? Absolutely not.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I like to there's never 100% of anything. I've noticed that there's never 100% of anything. I've noticed the more of this crap show that's going on, people, even people who were just like always yeah, nah, that'll never happen. Very pessimistic for the most part. And I have my days where I'm pessimistic, but then I'm just like, okay, let me just take a step back and take a look at what's going on, that kind of thing.
Oh,
There's
we all do.
even people, I think them are starting to realize this is not only this situation is not right, it's not logical, it's completely out of disorder, it seems fake.
Well, their narrative is starting to fall apart. And I think one of the big reasons for that is because the mainstream is starting to fall apart. And not only that, it's at least partially captured. I do believe that what we're seeing come out of the mainstream media right now, and this is a big reason why I maintain, or one of the many reasons that I maintain my faith in the plan, because you see what's coming out of mainstream media right now is absolutely shocking compared to even a few months ago in terms of what they're talking about and the information that they're letting come out. And there's no way that the deep state is behind that. The deep state is having to react. I do think that I agree with Gene's assessment that there's probably, I don't know exactly the percentage, but I think it's probably a good battle going on there with the white hats trying to ultimately take control of the media. But I see a very, very big difference. Have you noticed the difference in the mainstream media?
I have to, to some degree, but it's like I can only take so much of them just constantly lying in my face all day long. I'm just like,
well, sure, yeah. You don't like weapons
but,
being pointed at you. I don't either.
Yeah. But I do see a noticeable difference. I don't think it's enough just yet. I think I'm hoping they're flipping enough of these anchors on there in secret, saying, "Hey, white hat over here is going to make you disappear if you keep working for these Kabbalists. Play by our rules, and we'll make sure that you don't go to San Quentin or Gitmo or or the Grim Reaper or something like that. To kind of
this is a war behind the scenes. I mean, this is a war. These folks
no more
are being
playing
told.
nice. Yeah, no more playing nice. Most of these anchors you see on like Fox, they're getting paid millions of dollars a year. Believe me, they're not starving. I don't care what they say. If you have like a new anchor in some small local Fox channel making like 50,000 a year, okay, that's their bread and butter. I can understand if they're, put up against the wall by, by a corrupt FBI agent that has to, tell them what to do, because that's a cue pointed to. That's actually how the media works. Is they have an agent for like every building or something like that in the or for every story or something like that. Like it's very controlled. I've noticed, and I'm like, that's real interesting. So I can understand how some of these people are changing their tune, like kind of like Tucker Carlson played bad guy for a while, and then all of a sudden now he's asking the hard questions. And I think for monetary reasons, Fox just took such a hit from the betrayal of November 3rd. I think that the owners of Fox, the Murdochs, it's the Murdoch wives really that control a lot of things. That's what Matt Bracken points that out quite a bit. That they're losing so much money now that they can't just get a hand me out from the deep state. Like they're about to go bankrupt, so they have to get rid of their Democrat operatives in there. Like Donna Brazile was at Fox. why would you hire that thing anyways? I mean, for God's sakes, it's the woman's so corrupt. It's so bad. But then they have a guy like Juan Williams fighting with Dan Bongino. They're just like, wow. But no, it
And
was
so much of this I have to wonder because I mean, I like you, I don't really expose myself too much to the mainstream media. I mean, when I go into a coffee shop in the morning, and it's force fed on the TV, that's like
yeah.
enough for me. Or even walking by the newspaper section and just
Mhm.
glancing at the headlines it's just enough to make me ill anyway. But there's no question that something is happening behind the scenes there with the media, that something is changing, that the narrative is beginning to change.
Yeah.
And to me, that seems to be, I mean, if you were to operate under the assumption that it really was just simply the deep state and they were still in full control of the mainstream media,
Mhm.
you'd be very hard to, I think, to argue that point using the evidence. It would seem to be sort of their approach to a lot of these issues would seem to indicate the opposite. I mean, one example that comes to mind, of course, is all the media hysteria now all of a sudden about UFOs. And this, of
Yeah.
course, this is a huge, huge red pill for a lot of folks out there, because again, all of these years, for decades, the media has been telling everyone out there that UFOs it's a conspiracy theory. They've been denying it and denying it and denying it and laughing and all of a sudden they're taking the issue very seriously, and the information is dripping out. Now, is that because they're being forced to react to the information coming out? Possibly. But to me, it just seems as if their narrative seems to be very consistent with what I'm hearing is the white hat strategy, which is to let information drip out slowly to really plant seeds in the minds of the public. I mean, the UFO would be one example. The UFOs would be one example, but some other examples that I've even talked about on previous episodes would be, people like Ellen DeGeneres and Chrissy Teigen and all that, these celebrities are being taken down,
Mhm.
And I believe that this is being done methodically. First of all, I think a lot of these people, I do believe a lot of these people are already gone. And that a lot of what we're seeing on TV, especially in mainstream media, is a movie. I mean, that they can make almost anything look plausible, especially to the untrained eye. So I think a lot of these people are already gone. But I think that what we're witnessing right now is a slow rollout of what's been going on really for the past few years now in this
Yeah.
war. And more specifically, I think, with in terms of the celebrities and in terms of the world leaders and all of these folks who are wrapped up in the adrenochrome and the pedophilia and the child trafficking and the Satan worship and all of that stuff. I believe that Trump's been dealing with this. I think his first term behind the scenes, I mean, they went to war immediately against them. And I think that what we're going to be witnessing is the slow rollout of information, because it's very easy. And this is a position that it took me a while to arrive at, because I, like so many other patriots out there, just had the attitude of, to hell with these people who are asleep. All the information is out there, and who cares how they react when the truth comes out? Let the truth prevail. May the heavens fall. That was my attitude for a long
Same
time.
here. Same here.
And and there's a big part of me, of course, that's still on certain days, especially if I'm being honest, still thinks that way.
Oh yeah.
Because I get frustrated and I get angry and I get, I'm human, just like everybody else. But I've come to terms with the idea that the more I hear people explain and really talk about the way that the public has been programmed, especially Gene, because Gene really goes underneath the hood. I mean, he really gets deep about how deep this programming goes. And I don't know if you ever had a chance to listen to my series that I did on Agent Buried Alive, but I did a series on that book, and it talks all about how the programming works. And of course, I'm now actually just tonight I released an episode, first in the series on the Montauk Project, which of course is all about mind control. And the more that I learn about all this and how victimized the public has been for so long by the media. I mean, I'll tell you the truth. Even when I walk in to get my coffee in the morning, if I stare at that screen for long enough and look at those headlines for long enough, and I allow myself to slip into the trance. See, I'm trained against it now, but if I allow myself to slip into the trance, I could see how easy it would be for the average person because it's just so slick. It's so well produced. It's so highly financed. It's so confident that the average person, they believe what they see. You know, that as Gene says, you know, that authority is truth instead of truth being authority. And that's the world that they've created. And so the average person, they've been stuck inside of this matrix. And when they start to get hit with all this stuff that people like you and I and our audience already know about and have had a long time to be able to digest over years. I mean, you and I started waking up roughly around the same time. And we've gone through a process, and we're still going through a process as we learn more and more information. But I mean, you know, you take the horrors of child trafficking, for example, and the adrenochrome and I mean, we're talking about horrors that are just unspeakable, really. I mean, there are just no words that can describe how sick these people are. And so and these are the same people that the public has idolized for years. And, you know, and that's, of course, the cabal's trick. You know, they get you thinking, of course, that these people are just wonderful people. You know, they give you a guy like Barack Obama, who's smooth and slick and has got this great smile and he's articulate and erudite and all this stuff. And they got you thinking that there's no possible way that this man could be evil. There's no possible, forget about evil. There's no possible way this guy could be a bad guy. And that's how they've got you. And that's the trap that they've been able to spring on the public. Mm-hmm. And so when this information starts to come out, yes, of course, there's a part of me that says, you know what, the hell with these people. Let them wake up the same way I did. But this is going to be, the difference is going to be, they're going to have to awaken all at once. And they're going to be hit with all of this information all at once. And I do believe, and I hadn't really thought about this until I had heard a couple of people, Gene mentioned it. I think I heard, Simon Parks mention it in passing, and maybe Charlie Ward as well, but talked about how if all of this information were to come out, I mean, a lot of people are going to be so stunned and so in shock that, you know, a lot of these people could end up killing themselves. A lot of these people could end up, you know, going in hospitals. I mean, there's a lot of things that could happen, you know, the average person. And, you know, there's a part of me again that, depending on the day, you know, I say, well, you know, that's just a chance that we got to take, and the truth just has to come out. But at the same, which ultimately I believe, but I do think that if there is a plan, and I believe that there is one, if there is a plan to artfully divulge this information to the public in such a way that it can be a drip, and then a slow, maybe a light stream to kind of prime people's minds, because I think it's in essence what they're trying to do is they're trying to reverse the mind control. And I think the mind control didn't happen overnight. You have to remember that this has been going on. I mean, you know, we were born into a world controlled by the cabal. We were born into this complete deception, this matrix. We were able to wake up from, but the average person hasn't been able to do that. And not only that, they've been controlled. Their minds have been controlled literally for their entire lives. And so this is a major problem that they have to deal with, because they can't just flip a switch and just suddenly get all of these people out there who have been programmed to think that there's no possible way that the things that you and I are talking about, there's no possible way that this could be real. I mean, that's why they think we're lunatics. They've been programmed by the cabal to think that. Mm-hmm. But if they suddenly become aware that we were correct and their entire world falls apart, we could have an additional problem to deal with on top of it. So if there is a process where they can undo the mind control slowly and methodically by letting information drip out that while it's not in the mainstream, folks are still, because they're on the internet, they're still going to catch wind of it. And they're still it's going to, in essence, plant the seed in their mind. Well, oh, maybe Ellen DeGeneres isn't such a good person after all. Well, oh, maybe behind that smile, there really is, you know, maybe not an evil person, but, you know, maybe behind that smile isn't such a kind person. Or, you know, maybe that Chrissy Teigen isn't all we thought she was. So that way, when all of the real big stuff starts to come out, at least the public mind has been primed to some degree, so that maybe some of the shock won't be as bad. And I do think that while as frustrating as it is for us patriots, and again, you can completely disagree with me on this, but as frustrating as it is for us patriots, we have to look at all of these people around us as our fellows. And we have to remember that even though they're asleep and even though they just aggravate the bejesus out of us and they drive us crazy, and they're in large part the reason we're in this situation, the reality of the matter is that a lot of what's happening right now is really geared toward enabling these people to be able to recover from the information that's going to come out that's imminent. Now, whether or not the audits are going to be, whether 107 is correct about, the audits not making a difference. In terms of the courts, in terms of the system itself, I would agree, because, all of the evidence was already there. So if we had a system that was in any way representative of the will of the people, we would already know the truth. So as far as the system goes, yes. But in terms of public opinion, which I think is the real issue here, in terms of waking people up, I think that the audit could be massive. So I've gone on for a while. So your thoughts? And then we can maybe kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, because I have to get going soon too. I think the audits are going to prove to a lot of naysayers that 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 obviously those people were incorrect. That there's no fraud, or maybe there were a little bit, but no, there's so much fraud to the point where they're saying in some things 24%, and in some county, I think out in Michigan, had like 67% of discrepancies, and I'm like, they don't even allow past 0.001% of any kind of discrepancy, and that's in the law. So that I think is gonna wake up a lot of moderates up, people who just don't care much about the the Q operation, or if they call it a psyop, whatever it may be. I think the audits are probably gonna unite the good people, and I think that's a really good point to it. We do need to know methodically, forensically, what exactly happened, because I said it years ago. I'm like, yeah, they're gonna rig it. I don't know if they're gonna get away with it, but they're gonna rig it. But we need to know how they're doing it. And there's literally 10 different ways, according to Mike Lindell, how they've done it, and they're very slick ways. Like, wow, it's like you wouldn't think about that.
Well, it's actually the quantum voting system that was in place. We didn't even realize it, though. And really? Some folks have talked about that. Yeah, that all of these I'm sure you've heard that this was a sting operation. Ultimately, yes. that all of these ballots had a quantum signature on it. Now, I don't know whether it was quantum per se. I think, because I've heard Charlie Ward talk about the quantum voting system, and my recollection, and he knows quite a bit about the quantum financial system. So I would think that he would know a bit about that. And I know that Simon Parks talks about it a lot. And I do believe that they talked about how the system was already operational, because Trump and, of course, the White Hats, they all knew exactly what they were going to do. They knew exactly where they were going to cheat, how they were going to cheat. And so they marked all the ballots, and they have all the information. We already know exactly what happened. The audit ultimately, if you're paying attention, maybe not exactly, but if you're tuned in like most folks are in the audience, you already know essentially what happened in each one of these states and how it unfolded. If you have integrity and you've looked for the truth is out there.
Oh yeah.
And really, so I think that the whole time the White Hats knew that they were going to cheat. And I think that what we're seeing unfold right now is a slow, the truth comes out very, very slowly. That's the thing. It just takes a while, and that's what frustrates us, because there are so many different delay tactics, and there's so many different spins that the media can use, and so many different lawyers that they can send to try to. And so that I think is where we're at right now. But I think when this information comes out, and it's got to be, any day now, really. I think it's going to be very, very interesting in terms of public opinion. Now, I think we can sort of anticipate to some degree how the mainstream media is going to handle it. But even that is a bit of a mystery too, because it's going to depend a lot upon the American people. How in terms of our reaction, and if the deep state, I think in large part is going to approach the information and the narrative in any way that's advantageous to them. So we definitely are going to get the results of the audit, and what's going to come after that, I believe, is going to be an initiation of the emergency broadcast system.
Oh,
And
I hope so.
the reason that I believe that is because I think that for the first time, the deep state is going to be in a position here where information is going to come out, like we talked about already, that's irrefutable. It's scientific data. So the information is going to be out there, and the mainstream media isn't going to want to report that information. So what are they going to do? If they refuse to report the information at that point, which is very likely, at that point, I think that the military has all the justification they need. I mean, if it's true, because what a lot of these guys are saying on the inside is that what we're really waiting for right now, because there are several different aspects of what's going on. There's, of course, the military side of things. There's the quantum financial system / voting system. And then there's the public awakening process that needs to happen. And from what I'm hearing, the military conquest, if you will, of the deep state is all but over. It's basically the battle's been won, the war's been won. And I'm also hearing that the QFS is maybe not 100% operational, but getting very, very close. And it, by the way, a prerequisite to Trump's return. So I think the thing that we're really waiting for is not for the system to acknowledge the fraud, but I think it's ultimately for the American people to rise up. And whatever form that takes, I don't believe that, I'm not talking about rising up in a physical sense at this point, but rising up, I think getting angry enough, and whatever it is that they're looking at, that the white hats are looking at to be able to gauge public opinion. I think that if folks really get out there and become vocal and start demanding that we have free and fair elections, I think at that point we'll start to see things really start to happen. But I think until we see that, until the American people get angry and vocal enough and demand change loud enough and remain in a semi-apathetic state, I think we're going to continue to see this delay. Because one of the other elements here, and this is taking things yet again in another direction, but one of the other elements at play here, of course, is the non-terrestrial help that we're getting. And according to Gene and according to some other folks who I listen to and respect and believe, the non-terrestrials who are helping the alliance have a non-intervention policy until the people of a planet unite and basically demand change and demand help and demand, collectively ask for the help to be able to throw off the cabal. And so I think that the way Gene explains it is that because of all that the cabal has done to us, the non-terrestrials have already taken some countermeasures against the cabal so that we wouldn't be completely wiped out. But that ultimately the better world and that we're waiting for and that we're hoping for is really contingent upon the people collectively coming together and acknowledging the truth and saying we don't want to live in the system anymore. But it hinges upon unification, no matter what angle you look at it from, whether it's the non-terrestrials, whether it's the white hats or whatever. The key is that the American people need to wake up. And for patriots, again, like us, it's very, very frustrating because we've been trying our whole lives. Well, maybe not our whole lives, but we've been trying for years now to try to wake people up to no avail. And so, we've gotten to the point where we just say, you know what? Forget it. These people aren't going to wake up. Let's just get on with it. But I also think that we don't have access to all the information. And the more that we learn, the more that I learn, in essence, strangely, the more patient I become. Right. And not to say that I don't have days where I'm not patient, where I'm impatient. And a lot of things I start to question things because I'd be lying if I said I didn't. But overall, when I look at the evidence and I look at all the things that are happening, and the wheels that are still in motion, I'm seeing more evidence that we're moving in the right direction than I'm seeing evidence that this is some sort of a psyop and that we're the ones that are being conned. Because I've gone there. I've talked about that on my show because I believe that it's very important to look at a situation and analyze it from all different angles. And to be honest with, because that's a question that a lot of a lot of my listeners, probably all of my listeners, if they're being honest, at one point or another, have asked themselves, is this really real? Is all this stuff that I believe in actually real? And I believe it is, but that doesn't mean that, at certain points that I don't have my moments where I question things. But I think that at the end of the day, it really does. It's going to require more people than we currently have that are awake right now. The last time I talked to Gene, he said that it's only about 20% of people in America who really get what's going on. I mean, even people who voted for Trump, if you believe the numbers, and I do, that 80% of people who voted in the election voted for Trump, even those people, a lot of those people who are very good people and have great instincts, and politically speaking, I agree with them on most issues, but a lot of these people are really still fast asleep to a lot of what's really going on behind the scenes. So that's the problem that we face. And I think that the revelations have to come out slowly and artfully in order to keep society from completely falling apart, which is ultimately what both of us don't want to have happen. And you're approaching it, in a way that I basically did the same exact thing. And I was convinced at a certain point that the cavalry just wasn't coming, that it was ultimately going to be up to us, the Americans, the Patriots, to take back this country. And I believed at one point in time that sooner or later it was going to come down to a physical fight. But gradually as I started to learn more about Q and about the plan, and I started to really do a lot of research and listen to a lot of different voices, my viewpoint on that has evolved over time. So this has been a fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed this. Hopefully
yeah.
well. This has been really fun.
I had a blast, man. I definitely want to do this more.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I wish you obviously the best of luck in launching your channel. I think so. Do you want to tell folks what the best way to? Because I'm gonna post this video. So do you want to let folks know the best way to find your content?
Let me just hop on BitChute real quick. I look at the. Okay.
Almega just started his channel, so bear with him here. He's just launching this today. Literally just today. I think it was today, right?
I've had a channel just, obviously just to watch stuff, but it's my channel's called Omega 38. I'm probably going to rename it. It's a very simple.
I'll tell you what, you can do is once you rename it and it's ready to go, if you want to just send me the link to your channel, I can just put the link in the description of the video. So that way people can find your channel.
Sure.
And hopefully subscribe, because I think you're a really great guy to talk to. I had a really good time. We raised a lot of different topics that I think hopefully in future conversations we can get a little bit into some of these topics that we raised, because we certainly covered the waterfront tonight. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, no. Listen, man, it's I like the natural flow of conversation. Doesn't sound like just like just some normal interview or something like that. I think we come in with different ideas and obviously different things. A lot of people can resonate with that, because I've been listening to to these kinds of videos for years, and I'm like, I'd like to get on there and just kind of talk about what I what I feel a lot of these things, and I think a lot we can. I like your channel because you resonate with just everybody else. Some of their channels are very polished, but we can't resonate with very polished. You know what I mean? It's like,
I appreciate that. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's like you're speaking from your heart. You're speaking like, hey, I get pissed off. Some of these days I get impatient, and there's other people who won't say that because they're afraid to people to get demoralized or something like that. Like, no, say how you feel. Obviously, within control.
Well, that's another way that we've been conditioned to think, is to, to filter everything through, oh, am I going to, how is this going to be received by everyone before you say it? I'd rather just speak the truth, because at the end of the day, I mean, that's, the truth always ends up coming out. And I think people do resonate with the truth. And I also think that, while, some folks, I think that's why it's important to have so many different voices out there. I was really excited that that you messaged me, because I think it's important for more folks to have voices and to start podcasts, because you never know who's going to resonate with you. I didn't expect that so many people would be messaging me and saying, wow, I really love your show and keep going doing what you're doing. I never expected that. In the same way, you'll probably find in a similar way, a similar experience where you never know which folks are going to resonate with you. And,
Yeah,
so you coming on board here and essentially joining the team and entering the arena, you never know who's going to listen to you and be inspired by you. And that's how we're going to do this. I mean, patriot to patriot, that's how we're going to, that's how the Great Awakening has to be. Is ultimately it has to be our responsibility. I mean, I've been talking this entire time about how much faith I have in Q, but ultimately that's not to suggest that we don't have responsibility as patriots. And at the end of the day, it is up to us to take a country back. And this is the way that we do it. We do it by awakening our fellows and by connecting and making connections with our fellows and learning from one another and ultimately closing ranks and stop worrying so much about, how people are going to react to what you say and just speak the truth. And I think that that's ultimately what this country needs. That's what this world needs.
Oh yeah.
And I think that, so I think it's very exciting, and I'm very much looking forward to having another conversation. So let's wrap this up for tonight.
Yeah.
And I'll be in touch soon, and we'll set something up for a follow-up conversation.
Yeah, definitely, man.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Omega. And thank you so much, everybody in the audience, for joining us tonight. God bless each and every one of you. Omega, anything you want to say before we end the video?
No, God bless to all the patriots out there. You're listening to Patriot Underground. That's how I found this gentleman. He's a fantastic channel. He speaks his mind. He speaks the truth. He's a real person. Have his normal job like all of us out there as well do. I look forward to talking more, chatting more about this, and time flies when you're with like-minded people.
So absolutely. I know it's already been an hour and a half. Yeah, well, yeah, it's been great. You're absolutely right. Once the conversation gets flowing, and I love it too. I love this format of just having a conversation and a free flow of ideas. I think it's fantastic. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for the kind words, and thanks for your time, and God bless. We'll be in touch real soon.
Yeah. God bless, brother.